KimberleyDerrick, student number 20784929, and I'm doing my essay on how can CGI-based films be considered realist. Okay. How can CGI-based films be considered realist? Technology has advanced a great deal in the last 20 years. Long gone are the days of Psycho, where some thickened corn syrup spiralling into a plug hole was considered a realistic portrayal of blood, and the time where a stop-motion animation King Kong, though at the time of its release was considered a piece of technical mastery, was considered a realistic and scary portrayal of a monster. With the introduction of computer-generated imagery into our daily film viewing experience, we have been forced to accept its presence in almost every film we watch. Some would say this has taken away some of the magic of film, as CGI effects are leaving the audience with less of a feeling of how did they do that, and more of a feeling of they did that on a computer. So how does this apply to realism in film? Surely CGI cannot be considered an aspect of realism. In this essay I will be discovering whether CGI can indeed be considered realist. In order to do this, I will be looking mainly at two essays, CGI Animation, Pseudo-Realism, Perception and Possible Words by Dave Zerman 2003, and CGI Narrative in Children's Films by Caitlin Bernard 2011. I will also be looking at Andre Bazin's theories and looking into how they have been interpreted in order to explain CGI within realism. CGI and its place in the world today. CGI, or computer-based imagery, first came into the film medium in Tron 1981. Though most of the film, contrary to popular belief, wasn't actually CGI, it was the first film to use the medium of computer animation. Due to these advances in technology in recent years, film has become a medium that often takes from animation to create big special effects, interesting title sequences, and to even create whole characters and worlds. In some films, it is utilised to create beautiful imagery and world views that wouldn't be possible without it being animated. However, it can be argued that it has gone a little too far. Some films seem to be adopting CGI effects just for the sake of adopting CGI effects. Why do we rely so heavily on computer-generated imagery? CGI is mostly used in films today in order to create realistic effects in a cost-effective way. It's also safer to place actors in front of a green screen and key in an explosion later than it would be to actually film the actors near a real explosion. In its arguably most effective use, CGI is used to create new backdrops, new worlds, and even characters. But can this new form of cinematic storytelling be considered realist? According to Andre Bazin, there are three types of realism in cinema. An ontological realism, which, to paraphrase Bazin, restores the object in decor to their existential destiny, the weight of their presence. A dramatic realism, which refuses to separate the actor from the decor, the foreground from the background, and a psychological realism, which brings the spectator back to the real conditions of perception, a perception which is never really determined. It would be difficult to place CGI films into one of these categories. At a push it would fit in psychological realism, as it allows for the character to be separated from the decor. In a later article discussing CGI films, Lapsley and Westlake wrote, "This outlines the argument of CGI quite well. On one hand, CGI may not fit into film as it isn't part of what should have been in front of the camera, especially in a case like Jurassic Park, where such things as dinosaurs were obviously not part of what was actually captured on the day. However, as filmmakers, we should be allowed to express some creativity and not just film what's in front of us. So how can we justify the use of CGI in films today? This is where I will look at the works of Buckland in between science fact and science fiction, Spielberg's Dinosaurs, Possible Worlds, and the New Aesthetic Realism, written in 1999. From the perspective of Possible Worlds, reality is not simply made up of a fixed realm of fact upon to immediate experience, but a complex structure of subsystems, only one of which is actual. In opposition to logical positivism, theory of possible worlds stipulates that non-actual possibilities make perfectly coherent systems, which can be described and qualified, imagined and intended, and to which one can refer. The notion that one can refer to the non-actual, possible world has a significant number of consequences for theories of filmic representation. In this text, Buckland explains the theory of possible world, where if it can be related to our own world in some way, it can be considered real. For example, in Jurassic Park 1991, the story is set in our current world, except for the fact that someone has discovered a way to bring dinosaurs back to life. This is in relation to our current world, so the act of bringing the dinosaur back to life creates a possible world, which can be considered realist. Buckland then goes on to directly link this to CGI. Film, or at least the post-photographic or digital image, has the unique capacity to present access to possible worlds and to combine seamlessly the actual with the possible, by means of digital special effects. The specificity of film's presentation of possible worlds therefore lies in its digital capacity. So just because CGI can be considered realist, does that mean we can use it in any and all films, or that it should be used? In truth, CGI is cost effective and makes sets safer for actors. However, many people feel that the overuse of CGI is killing the imagination of the filmmaker, as they have a way out of making creative decisions during production in order to create new imagery and wow audiences with new filming techniques. Recently, the Evil Dead franchise brought out a remake or sequel to the original made in 1981, where, like the original, there was no CGI involved in the film other than touch-ups. Although the original was without CGI due to the fact CGI was in its very early stages and was expensive to use. In the 2011 version, it was a creative choice not to use CGI, and it seems audiences have praised it for its effects, despite all of them being created during production. To conclude, it's obvious CGI has become a part of our filmic experience in almost every film. This isn't a negative thing. Perhaps we should begin to take a step back from technology and really think whether every film needs CGI.